The stars had never looked so cold to Captain Jake Morrison as he stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance. 3 days ago, his ship had been on a routine patrol near the outer edge of the solar system. Now everything had changed. The radio message they received still echoed in his mind like a bad dream. Admiral Vextar of the Zenthari Empire had made himself very clear. Earth had exactly 72 hours to surrender completely to something called the Galactic Council. If they refused, every human being on the planet would be destroyed. The alien had spoken in perfect English, which somehow made the threat even more frightening. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. 200 ships hung in space like deadly metal sharks, each one longer than 3 football fields. Their hulls were smooth and dark, covered with weapons that could probably turn a mountain into dust. The aliens had positioned themselves just outside Pluto's orbit, close enough to attack, but far enough to show they were not afraid of anything Earth might throw at them. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake stood beside Jake, studying the enemy formation on his tablet. Ryan had been Earth's best military tactician before they built the space fleet. Now he was trying to figure out how 23 human ships could possibly fight 200 alien ones. "They move like dancers," Ryan said quietly. "Look at how they stay in perfect lines. Every ship is exactly the same distance from the others. It's like watching a computer program." Jake nodded. The alien ships did move with mechanical precision. When one turned, they all turned at exactly the same moment. When they changed speed, every ship accelerated together. It was impressive, but something about it bothered Jake. It reminded him of his old drill sergeant back on Earth, who always said that being too predictable in a fight was the fastest way to get killed. On the main screen, Admiral Lisa Parker appeared from the command ship UNS Vengeance. She looked tired but determined. Lisa had fought in 3 wars on Earth before becoming the head of humanity's small space navy. Her gray hair was pulled back tight and her eyes held the hard look of someone who had seen too much death. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker," she said. "I know you're all thinking the same thing I am. Those alien ships look impossible to beat. Their weapons are stronger than ours. Their shields can stop anything we normally shoot at them. They have us outnumbered 10-1. Jake felt his stomach sink. If Admiral Parker was starting with how hopeless things looked, the situation must be even worse than he thought. "But," Lisa continued, "I've been reading the reports from our science teams. These aliens have been ruling their part of space for 3,000 years. 3,000 years of easy victories. 3,000 years of fighting enemies who use the same kind of weapons they do. 3,000 years of never having to adapt or change their tactics." Ryan looked up from his tablet with sudden interest. "She's right, Captain. Look at their formation. It's perfect for fighting other energy weapon ships. But what if we don't fight the way they expect?" On another screen, Dr. Helen Carter, from the Science Division, was explaining what they had learned about the alien technology. Helen was young but brilliant, and she had been studying the alien transmissions non-stop since they arrived. "Their shields are amazing," Helen said. "They can absorb massive amounts of energy and redirect it harmlessly into space. But here's the interesting part. They're designed specifically for energy weapons, plasma cannons, laser beams, particle accelerators, all the fancy stuff that advanced civilizations apparently use." Jake began to understand what she was getting at. "But we're not an advanced civilization, not by their standards." "Exactly," Helen smiled. "We still use kinetic weapons, railguns that fire solid metal slugs, missiles with explosive warheads, even old-fashioned bullets. To them, we probably look like cavemen with clubs." Chief Engineer Pete Collins joined the conversation from the engine room. Pete was a practical man who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. He had kept the Defiance running through 2 asteroid storms and a reactor malfunction that should have killed them all. "I've been looking at our weapon systems," Pete said. "Our railguns fire depleted uranium rounds at about 15% of light speed. Those alien shields are designed to stop energy, not solid matter moving that fast. It would be like trying to stop a bullet with a mirror." Jake felt something he hadn't felt since the aliens arrived. Hope. Maybe they weren't as helpless as everyone thought. Maybe being primitive was actually an advantage. Admiral Vextar's voice came over the communication system again. The alien sounded bored, like he was reading from a script he had used many times before. Primitive humans of Earth, you have 12 hours remaining to surrender. Your weapons are inferior, your ships are slow and weak, your military tactics are crude and undisciplined. Submit now and some of you may be allowed to serve the Galactic Council. Continue to resist, and you will all be eliminated. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were scared, he could see it in their eyes, but they were also angry. The alien had just made a big mistake. He had insulted them, threatened their families, and assumed they would give up without a fight. "Admiral Parker," Jake said into his communicator. "What are your orders?" Lisa's voice came back steady and strong. "All ships prepare for combat. We're going to show these aliens something they've never seen before. We're going to show them how humans fight when they have nothing left to lose." The countdown timer on Jake's screen showed 11 hours and 57 minutes until the aliens would attack. It wasn't much time to prepare, but it would have to be enough. The Galactic Council was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one everyone underestimates. The first shots of the war came exactly 12 hours after Admiral Vextar's final warning. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UNS Defiance as brilliant blue beams of energy lanced across space from the alien fleet. The plasma cannons were beautiful and terrifying, like lightning made solid and aimed with deadly precision. The human ships scattered immediately. This was not the neat formation fighting that the Galactic Council expected. Admiral Lisa Parker had ordered every captain to move unpredictably, to break apart and regroup, to never give the aliens a clear target for more than a few seconds. "Incoming plasma burst on our starboard side," called out Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the tactical station. "Distance closing fast." Jake gripped his command chair as the Defiance rolled hard to port. The alien energy beam passed so close that the ship's hull began to glow from the heat. On the main screen, he could see the UNS Courage taking a direct hit. The smaller ship's shields flared bright white and then failed completely. But instead of exploding as everyone expected, the Courage kept flying. "Their shields are down, but the ship is still intact," Ryan Blake reported with surprise. "The plasma went right through the outer hull but didn't destroy the internal structure." Jake realized what this meant. The alien weapons were designed to overload energy shields and then dissipate. They were incredibly powerful but not built to deal massive physical damage to unshielded targets. It was like using a flamethrower to fight someone wearing a fire suit. Devastating if the suit failed, but not necessarily fatal to what was underneath. "Admiral," Vextar's voice crackled over the communication channel. He sounded confused and slightly annoyed. "Human vessels, your defensive posture is chaotic and inefficient. Form proper battle lines so this engagement can be concluded quickly." Jake almost laughed. The alien commander was actually complaining that humans weren't fighting fair. He was upset that they wouldn't line up nicely to be destroyed. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker," came Lisa's voice over the fleet channel. "Execute Plan Caveman. Show these aliens what primitive weapons can do." The human fleet suddenly changed tactics completely. Instead of trying to avoid the alien energy weapons, they charged straight toward the Council formation. Every ship opened fire at the same time, but not with energy beams or plasma cannons. They used railguns. The UNS Defiance shuddered as its main railgun fired. The depleted uranium slug accelerated down the magnetic barrel at nearly 50,000 miles per second. Jake watched the tactical display as similar projectiles streaked out from every human ship. 23 solid metal rounds, each weighing several tons, flying toward the alien fleet at a significant fraction of light speed. The results were immediate and shocking. The alien shields, designed to absorb and redirect energy, had no effect whatsoever on solid matter. The railgun slugs passed through the energy barriers like they weren't even there. The first alien ship to be hit simply came apart. The kinetic energy was so enormous that the vessel's hull shattered like glass. Admiral Vextar's calm, superior tone changed instantly to one of alarm. "Impossible. Our shields are rated for plasma cannons up to 50,000 terawatts. How are primitive, kinetic weapons penetrating our defenses?" Dr. Helen Carter's voice came over the communication system from her position on the UNS Vengeance. "Because your shields were never designed to stop physical objects, Admiral. You've been fighting energy weapon civilizations for so long that You forgot kinetic energy still works. The alien formation began to shift, trying to adjust to this unexpected threat. But 3,000 years of rigid tactics had made them slow to adapt. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, which meant they couldn't react quickly to individual threats. When one ship needed to dodge, the entire formation had to reorganize. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake was studying the enemy movement patterns on his tactical screen. "Captain, look at this. They're trying to maintain formation integrity even while under attack. They can't break formation without losing their tactical coordination." Jake saw the opportunity immediately. "Sarah, target. The lead ship in the center formation. Pete, give me everything the railgun has." Chief Engineer Pete Collins's voice came from the engine room. "Railgun charged and ready, Captain. This shot will drain our main power for 30 seconds, but it'll hit harder than anything we've fired yet." The Defiance's railgun fired again, and this time the slug was moving even faster. It struck the alien flagship's escort vessel dead center. The ship didn't just break apart, it vaporized. The kinetic energy was so intense that it turned solid metal into an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The psychological effect on the alien fleet was immediate. Ships began breaking formation for the first time in the battle. Some tried to retreat, others attempted to scatter. But their long reliance on coordinated tactics made independent action nearly impossible for them. On the human side, individual captains were making their own decisions. Captain Amy Rodriguez of the UNS Liberty performed a maneuver that no alien tactician could have predicted. She used her damaged ship's momentum to ram an enemy vessel while simultaneously firing all weapons. Both ships were destroyed, but she took out a vessel 3 times larger than her own. The battle was becoming chaos, and chaos favored the humans. Every alien ship was more advanced and better armed than its human counterpart, but the humans were fighting like they had nothing to lose. Because they didn't, Admiral Vextar tried to regain control of the situation. "All ships implement Defensive Pattern 7, maintain minimum safe distance from enemy kinetic weapons," but it was too late. The humans had already shown that the Galactic Council's 3,000 years of military superiority meant nothing against enemies who refused to fight by the established rules. The aliens had brought energy weapons to a kinetic fight, and they were learning a painful lesson about the difference between advanced technology and effective tactics. Jake watched the tactical display as more alien ships took hits from human railguns. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the aliens arrived, humanity had drawn first blood. The second wave of alien attacks came 2 hours after the first battle ended. Admiral Vextar had regrouped his remaining ships and was clearly angry. His fleet had lost 12 vessels to humanity's primitive weapons, something that should have been impossible according to every military textbook in the Galactic Council. Jake Morrison stood in the damaged bridge of the UNS Defiance, watching his crew work frantically to repair their systems. The ship had taken several hits from alien energy weapons, and half their equipment was either broken or running on backup power. But they were still alive, which was more than Jake had expected when the day began. "Captain, we have a problem." Chief Engineer Pete Collins called from the engine room. "Our main railgun is offline. The magnetic coils melted during that last shot. We've got maybe one more firing before the whole system fails." Jake nodded grimly. Most of the human fleet was in similar condition. Their ships were tough, but not built for extended combat against superior technology. If they were going to survive the next attack, they needed to think of something new. On the communications screen, Admiral Lisa Parker looked tired but determined. Behind her, Jake could see sparks flying from damaged equipment on the bridge of the UNS Vengeance. "All captains, listen carefully. Our conventional weapons are running out. Time to get creative." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake looked up from his tactical station with a strange expression. "Captain, I have an idea. It's completely crazy, but it might work." "At this point, crazy might be our best option," Jake replied. Ryan pointed to the tactical display showing the approaching alien fleet. "They're maintaining the same formation as before, just with more spacing between ships. They think they've learned from the first battle. But what if we don't use our railguns at all?" Jake frowned. "Then what do we fight with?" "Everything else," Ryan said with a grin. Our garbage disposal system can launch debris at high velocity. Our life support vents can be used to create thrust for ramming maneuvers. Even our communication array could be turned into a weapon if we pump enough power through it. The idea was insane, but Jake had seen enough impossible things today to keep an open mind. "Pete, can you make our ship into a weapon?" Pete's laugh came over the intercom. "Captain, I've been turning broken equipment into working equipment my whole career. Turning working equipment into weapons should be easy." Across the fleet, other human crews were having similar conversations. Commander Amy Rodriguez of the UNS Liberty was explaining to her crew how they could use their damaged fighter bay as a massive shotgun, launching everything from spare parts to coffee makers at enemy ships. The aliens had never faced projectiles, like screwdrivers and kitchen equipment moving at combat speeds. Dr. Helen Carter had discovered something interesting about the alien communication systems. "Their ships are all networked together," she reported to Admiral Parker. "They share tactical information instantly, which is why they can coordinate so perfectly. But that also means if we can disrupt their network, we can blind their entire fleet." "How do we do that?" Lisa asked. "We turn our communication arrays into jamming devices. Instead of sending messages, we broadcast white noise on every frequency they use. It won't destroy their ships, but it will make them deaf and dumb." The second battle began differently than the first. The alien ships approached in their modified formation, confident that their increased spacing would protect them from human kinetic weapons. Admiral Vextar's voice came over the communication channel, still arrogant despite his losses. "Primitive humans, you cannot repeat your earlier success. We have adapted to your crude tactics. Surrender now and avoid further destruction." Instead of responding with words, Admiral Parker gave the order to implement what the human fleet was, now calling Protocol Chaos. Every human ship suddenly began broadcasting on every communication frequency at maximum power. The coordinated alien formation immediately began to wobble as ships lost contact with each other. Some vessels slowed down, others sped up, and several nearly collided as their perfect coordination fell apart. At the same time, the human ships began firing everything they had. Not just their remaining functional weapons, but literally everything. The UNS Defiance launched its entire supply of spare parts from the garbage disposal system. Bolts, panels, broken equipment, and even someone's lunch tray went screaming toward the alien fleet at thousands of miles per hour. The aliens were completely unprepared for this kind of attack. Their shields could stop energy weapons and even railgun slugs, but they had no defense against being pelted with thousands of small metal objects. It was like being caught in a hailstorm made of steel and titanium. Commander Amy Rodriguez took the improvisation to a new level. Her ship's main engines were damaged, but instead of retreating, she used the malfunction to her advantage. The engines were venting plasma uncontrollably, creating a trail of superheated gas behind her ship. She flew directly through the alien formation, using her ship as a flying blowtorch. The psychological effect was devastating. The aliens had never encountered enemies who became more dangerous when their equipment was broken. Human crews were turning system failures into weapons, using damage as a tactical advantage, and fighting with a creativity that 3,000 years of military doctrine hadn't prepared the Council for. Admiral Vextar's calm command voice was replaced by increasingly frantic orders. "All ships maintain formation, do not break ranks, ignore the debris impacts and focus on primary targets." But his ships couldn't ignore the impacts. Each piece of human garbage hit with the force of a small bomb. Alien hull plating began to crack under the constant bombardment. Sensor arrays were smashed. Communication equipment was destroyed by flying coffee makers and broken computer parts. Jake watched the battle unfold with amazement. His crew was fighting with equipment that shouldn't work, using tactics that made no logical sense, and somehow winning against vastly superior technology. It was chaos, but it was human chaos, and that made all the difference. The third battle was different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. Jake Morrison's ship, the UNS Defiance, was barely holding together. Half the lights on the bridge were dead, the air recycling system was making horrible grinding noises, and there was a hole in the outer hull that Pete Collins had sealed with metal plates and what he called good old-fashioned stubbornness. But Jake had never felt more confident. The human fleet had learned something important in the previous fights. The aliens were predictable. They followed rules. They had procedures for everything and couldn't adapt when those procedures failed. Humans, on the other hand, got more creative the more desperate they became. Admiral Vextar's fleet had been reduced to 140 ships, but they were still vastly superior in firepower and technology. The alien commander had made changes to his tactics, but they were still the same kind of organized, systematic changes that military computers would recommend. He was thinking like a machine trying to solve a logic problem. "Captain, we're getting reports from across the fleet," Lieutenant Sarah Kim announced from her station. "The UNS Courage has turned their medical bay into a weapons factory. They're manufacturing explosive devices from surgical equipment and anesthesia gas." Jake shook his head in amazement. Only humans would think to turn an operating room into a bomb-making facility. What else? The UNS Liberty is using their gravity generator to create artificial gravity wells. They're pulling enemy ships off course and causing collisions. And the UNS Vengeance has somehow turned their cafeteria into a mass driver. They're launching frozen meals at enemy sensors. Ryan Blake looked up from his tactical display with a wild grin. "Captain, I have an idea for something called Protocol Crazy Ivan. It's named after an old submarine tactic from Earth's naval wars." "I'm almost afraid to ask," Jake replied. "We use our gravity drive to create a localized space-time distortion. Basically, we make a gravity whirlpool that pulls enemy ships toward each other. It's never been done before because it's incredibly dangerous and could destroy our own ship." Jake considered this for exactly 3 seconds. "Do it." Chief Engineer Pete Collins had been listening to the conversation from the engine room. "Captain, that plan could tear our ship apart. The gravity drive isn't designed to create those kinds of distortions. Pete, is there any piece of equipment on this ship that we're still using the way it was designed?" There was a pause. Then Pete's laughter came over the intercom. "Good point, Captain. Give me 10 minutes to completely violate every safety regulation in the manual." Meanwhile, across the battlefield, other human crews were implementing their own insane plans. Dr. Helen Carter had discovered that the alien ship's computer systems were vulnerable to something they had never encountered before: computer viruses written by humans. The aliens' artificial intelligence was incredibly advanced, but had no defense against chaotic, illogical programming created by minds that didn't think in straight lines. Helen was broadcasting what she called digital madness directly into the alien network. Her virus didn't try to steal information or shut down systems in any organized way. Instead, it made alien computers confused. Navigation systems started giving random directions. Weapons targeting began aiming at empty space. Life support systems began playing human music instead of recycling air. Sergeant Major Frank Williams had somehow managed to do something that should have been impossible. He had boarded an enemy vessel. His fighter had been shot down, but instead of dying in space, he had used his emergency suit thrusters to reach an alien ship. Now he was inside their hull, moving through their corridors with nothing but a plasma rifle and what he called 40 years of being too stubborn to die. "Frank's a..." Voice crackled over the communication system as he reported his progress. "These aliens build their ships like fancy hotels. Everything is clean and organized and pretty, but they don't know how to fight someone who's already inside their house. I've disabled 3 major systems just by hitting them with a wrench." Admiral Vexitar was becoming increasingly frantic. His perfect fleet was falling apart in ways that defied all logical military analysis. Ships were being destroyed by frozen food, disabled by computer viruses that made no sense, and pulled out of formation by impossible gravity distortions. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Vextar," came the alien's voice, no longer calm and superior. "Your tactics are chaotic and dangerous. You are violating every established rule of civilized warfare. This cannot continue." Admiral Lisa Parker's response was broadcast to both fleets. "Admiral, there's something you need to understand about humans. We don't fight civilized wars. We fight to win." At that moment, Jake's ship executed Protocol Crazy Ivan. The UNS Defiance suddenly created a gravity well so intense that it pulled 3 alien vessels toward each other. The ships collided in a spectacular explosion that lit up the darkness of space. But the maneuver also nearly tore the Defiance apart. The hull groaned under stress that no Earth-built ship was designed to handle. Hull integrity at 20%, Sarah Kim reported. "We can't do that again." "We won't need to," Jake replied, watching the tactical display. The alien formation was completely broken. Individual ships were trying to retreat, but they had no experience fighting as separate units. Their entire military doctrine was based on coordinated fleet actions. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, piloting her damaged fighter, implemented the most desperate tactic yet. Her ship was dying, her life support was failing, and her weapons were offline. So she did something that horrified the alien observers. She flew directly toward an enemy cruiser, pretended to be dead debris until the last second, then detonated her fusion reactor while ejecting in an escape pod. The explosion took out not just her target, but 2 other alien ships that were too close. The aliens watched in shock as a human pilot sacrificed her ship and nearly her life to destroy 3 enemy vessels. It was a level of desperate courage that their military manuals had no procedures for handling. The battle was turning into a rout, but not the kind Admiral Vextar had expected. His technologically superior fleet was being defeated by enemies, who fought like cornered animals, unpredictably, desperately, and with a creativity born from having nothing left to lose. The silence that followed the last explosion was more frightening to Admiral Vextar than all the chaos that had come before. His flagship, the Eternal Glory, drifted alone in space, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Of the 200 ships he had brought to conquer Earth, only 37 remained functional. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance, hardly believing what he was seeing on the tactical display. The mighty Galactic Council fleet was retreating, not making a strategic withdrawal or regrouping for another attack, but actually running away. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were fleeing toward the edge of the solar system as fast as their engines could carry them. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the alien flagship," Lieutenant Sarah Kim reported from her station. Her escape pod had been rescued after her heroic sacrifice, and she was back on duty despite the medical team's protests. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. Admiral Vextar appeared on the main display, and he looked like a completely different being from the arrogant commander who had demanded Earth surrender. His uniform was torn, his face showed signs of stress that Jake didn't know aliens could feel, and his eyes held something that looked almost like fear. "Human Fleet Commander," Vextar began, his voice shaky. "I am Admiral Vextar of the Zenthari Empire, speaking for the Galactic Council. We wish to discuss terms." Admiral Lisa Parker's image appeared on a split screen, broadcasting from the UNS Vengeance. Her ship looked like it had been through a blender, but she was smiling. "Terms? You mean surrender terms?" "No," Vextar said quickly. "We wish to discuss an alliance, a mutual defense pact. We withdraw all claims on your solar system and offer recognition of human sovereignty over your territory." Jake couldn't help but laugh. The aliens who had come to conquer Earth were now asking to be friends. It would have been funny if so many people hadn't died to make it happen. Dr. Helen Carter's voice came over the fleet communication system from her science station. "Admiral Parker, I'm monitoring alien communications across their entire fleet. They're in complete panic. Their command structure has collapsed. Most of their ships can't even coordinate with each other anymore." The truth was becoming clear. The Galactic Council had never faced an enemy like humanity before. Every species they had conquered in their 3,000 years of expansion had been technologically advanced, but militarily predictable. They used energy weapons. They fought in formations. They followed logical tactical doctrines. Humans did none of those things. Humans turned coffee makers into weapons, used broken equipment more effectively than working equipment, and treated desperate situations as opportunities for creativity rather than reasons to surrender. The aliens had no defense against enemies who became more dangerous when they were losing. Sergeant Major Frank Williams' voice crackled over the communication. system from inside the alien ship he had somehow infiltrated. "Admiral Parker, you need to hear this. I'm in their command center, and they're having what I can only describe as a nervous breakdown. Their computers keep trying to analyze human tactics, but they can't process anything we've done. The artificial intelligence actually crashed trying to understand why we launched frozen meals at their sensors." Chief Engineer Pete Collins had been listening to the conversations while trying to keep the Defiance from falling apart completely. "Captain, I think I understand what happened here. These aliens have been winning battles with superior technology for so long that they forgot how to actually fight. They've been using the same tactics for centuries because they always worked. We beat them because we had to learn how to fight with inferior equipment." Jake nodded. That made sense. Earth's military history was full of smaller forces defeating larger ones through superior tactics, desperation, and the willingness to try anything that might work. The aliens had never needed to develop those skills because their technology had always been enough. Admiral Vexitar was still waiting for a response to his offer of alliance. Behind him on the screen, Jake could see alien crew members frantically working at their stations trying to repair systems damaged by the strangest weapons they had ever encountered. "Admiral Vexitar," Lisa Parker said finally, "we'll consider your offer. But first we want some information. How many other species are part of your Galactic Council? How many of them joined willingly, and how many were conquered?" Vexitar hesitated before answering. "The Council governs 17-star systems. Most species chose to join after seeing demonstrations of our military power. Some required more persuasion. In other words, you've been bullying your way across the galaxy for 3,000 years, Jake said. And nobody ever fought back effectively because they all used the same kind of weapons and tactics you did." "That is an accurate assessment," Vexitar admitted. Ryan Blake looked up from his tactical station with a thoughtful expression. "Captain, I think we just changed the balance of power in this part of the galaxy. If word gets out that the mighty Galactic Council can be defeated, other species might start getting ideas about independence." Admiral Parker seemed to be thinking the same thing. "Admiral Vexitar, here are our terms. You will immediately withdraw from our solar system. You will send a message to all species under Council control, informing them that Earth has successfully resisted conquest and is offering assistance to any world that wishes to declare independence. And you will provide us with star charts and information about Council military capabilities." Vexitar's face showed an expression that Jake interpreted as despair. "If we do this, it will mean the end of the Council's authority. Other species will rebel, our empire will collapse." "Your empire was built on fear and superior technology," Lisa replied. "Now everyone will know that technology isn't enough if you don't know how to really fight. Maybe it's time for the galaxy to have some new leadership." Jake watched as the remaining alien ships continued their retreat toward deep space. The war was over, but he realized that in many ways, it was just beginning. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy not as a primitive species to be conquered, but as a force that could defeat anyone who underestimated the power of determination, creativity, and the refusal to give up. The stars didn't look cold anymore. They looked like opportunities.